Hello, bonjour, and welcome to your new RT1 Exchange video. Welcome to this channel where we explore together, we learn about and we taste the wonderful world of wine. If you're not familiar with the RT1 Exchange, it is a wine investment and trading platform as well as a wine club. Check out the link in the video description absolutely to learn more about it. We're finishing today our series about Spanish wines. We've talked about all the best wine styles from Spain so far, the Riojas, the Priorat, and many more. You can check out the entire series. I think we're up to 6 or 7 episodes so far, but there's a delightful wine style that I haven't talked about yet. It's the delicious Cava sparkling wine. Yes, Spain has had a long tradition of producing excellent Bubblies as well. It's not as famous or prestigious as champagne from France, yes of course, and it's a shame really, because Cavas are not only fascinating to explore but truly delicious as well, very well crafted too. So let's have a look at Cava. How is it different to champagne from a quality standpoint, but also of course value, craftsmanship, price, etc. Let's go. Cava essentially means Spanish sparkling wine. Yes, it's Cava, not Cava. But it's not any type of sparkling. It has to be made a certain way and a good way. It's not dissimilar to the French crément, the title, in that it's a nationwide kind of appellation and a stamp of a certain quality level. Unlike many Italian sparklings, for example, like Prosecco, that is made to become bubbly in large tanks, Cava is made just like French champagne by re-fermenting the wine inside the bottle you buy it into. So this wine in this bottle was fermented inside this very bottle, which makes a huge difference in quality, finer bubbles, better texture, more balance into the wine, more aromatic complexity and finesse. It's crucial. Cava is the real deal, quality sparkling it has to be. Now the name Cava is not a region, it means cellar. You would have noticed that the word Cava resembles the word cave. That's essentially what it means, a dark wine cellar where the bottles are matured. They lay down in that dark cellar. The winery's cellar is what Cava originally means. Cava can be produced pretty much anywhere in Spain. The majority is made though in Catalonia, near Barcelona, with local grapes for historic and climatic reasons, that is, often from the Penedès region. But wineries can make Cava elsewhere in the country, like in Aragon, Navarra, Valencia, etc. But most Cava wines really are made in Catalonia, which is where the style was invented in the 1870s, so it's a little while ago, by a man called Josep Raventos. On his return from France, he essentially recreated the champagne style locally in Catalonia. For a long time, Cava was called champagne or champaña in Spain, but in the 1970s, the French said to the Spanish, you cannot use the word champagne even, it's just too close to champagne, and champagne is French, so you have to stop that. The grapes used for making Cava wines are specific local Spanish grapes, namely a blend of Xarel·lo, Macabeu and Perelada in particular, although the grapes of Champagne, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir are also allowed and used here. Sometimes they're blended with the locals for a different element, a different style closer to the French champagne style when you add those Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, especially aromatically. I think the wine called Anna by Codorniu started this trend of using more Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and approaching a more champagne style, if you wish. But it's not the case for all Cavas. For how Cava is made, it's essentially just like a French champagne in the winemaking process. A first fermentation of the grape juices in tanks, and then a second fermentation in the bottle, which gives it its bubbles. It also adds creamy texture and the toasty, yeasty flavors. Bottle fermentation does that. What matters a lot for this type of sparkling made using traditional method or méthode traditionnelle is how long the wine is aged for on its lees in the bottle on the dead yeasts at the bottom, if you wish. The longer, the better. And the Cava appellation has recently made it harder on itself, self-imposing to bring the quality upwards of the wines a lot. In 2020, they regulated the increase of aging times significantly. And a basic cava, and this one really kind of is as well, has to be aged for at least 9 months on its lees in the bottle before release to gain those benefits from lees aging, the creamy texture, the aromatic complexity as I described before. As a comparison, French champagne has to be aged 12 months on its lees, so 3 months more. Basic cava is a little more basic than champagne, but not by that much when you look at it, 9 months versus 12. Where it gets interesting is when you get into the Reserva style of cava. Since 2020, those must be aged for at least 18 months on lees, double. It was 15 months before 2020, meaning Reserva cavas are now aged for longer than champagnes. Reserva cavas also have a maximum yield for the production of grapes in the vineyards compared to regular cava to obtain more concentrated juices and better flavors. All reservas have to be dated vintage or multi-vintage, but they have to have a harvest year on them, somewhat like a vintage champagne for the sake of transparency, and I think it's a good thing. Although the style called Gran Reserva is really more the one that is more like vintage champagnes, it must be aged for at least 30 months, just like a vintage champagne. So Gran Reserva is really more like the top vintage champagne type of wine. On top of that, all Cava Reservas and Gran Reservas now have to be organically farmed from vines that are at least 10 years of age, something that champagne doesn't impose on producers yet. You see, Cava wines are serious sparklings made with the same method as champagne, with different grapes for the majority of the blends, but with local grapes that are more suited to the local Spanish climate and terroir, which only makes sense. Why would they do differently? And because the Spanish want to be recognized for and highlight the quality of their production, they've drastically increased the legal requirements for the production process of their Reserva and Gran Reservas in particular, to really make the wines as good, if not better, than some champagnes, and make a point about it. And it shows when you actually get to taste them. And so all cavas are obviously a little different. Every producer, every brand has its own signature style. But let's say that the cava style is very close to the champagne style, at least in the grand scheme of the world's sparkling wine. If you look at them from afar, cava is really not far from champagne. Cheap cavas are simpler than entry-level French champagnes though, sure. But they're really cheap. You can get them for $10, $15, and really for that price you're getting something decent, way closer to champagne than if you buy a similarly priced Italian Prosecco for sure. And you won't get a French, obviously, champagne for that type of money, not even close. So it's always a good value option if you're on a budget to get something fairly decent. If you spend a little more on a good cava though, is where it gets really interesting. You can get a Reserva wine really carefully crafted using very good grapes with aging times just as long or longer than a champagne, and for sometimes cheaper than a basic champagne. You can really get a characterful cava if you spend $25, $30 and up, while champagnes can be quite boring and bland really at that price point, and if you can even find any champagne at that price. Go with a Gran Reserva and you'll have a high-end vintage cava that will cost you about the same as a mid-range non-vintage champagne, so it's definitely worth trying out, exploring, at least, I think. My advice for today. Style-wise, I find cavas to be perhaps a little more austere, a little more rugged than champagne. The local grapes have a little more grip to them, often not just as smooth and delicate than Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from Champagne. But that's not actually always a bad thing. It gives them a little more personality, a little more grip, a little more punch, and a little something different, which is actually interesting to experience, as each cuvee has its signature, not only from how it's made, but from the grapes that it was made from. For wine enthusiasts, this is very interesting, I find. Many producers push very hard also towards organic or biodynamic farming as well. I think it's essentially way easier to grow organic grapes in Catalonia than it is in Champagne because of the climate. So it's an easier option for them, but that certainly actually helps Catalonia for respecting the environment, of course, but also giving the wines more minerality and giving them a more terroir-driven approach. And you find that very much in a lot of cavas. The new appellation called Corpinat, I'll let you look it up, I don't really have time to explain it all, is definitely a testimony of that. Cava is progressing, making progress. There are different sweetness levels as well in Cava, just like in Champagne, but Cava producers often like the drier styles that are like the Brut Nature, which has zero or very little added sugars. You have also the Extra Brut that has just a tiny bit of sugar, while most Champagnes, as you know, come as Brut, which has a little more added sugar, up to 12 grams, which is quite a lot. This explains also why, generally speaking, Champagne are a bit smoother as well, because you know, some of them have a little more sugar as well, and that definitely helps. A lot of Cava producers go for that drier style. The Brut Nature and Extra Brut are really crisp and zingy, and they do give, because there's no added sugar, no interference from the sugar, a purer expression, a better sense of what the grapes tasted like originally. And I find this really interesting. Perhaps Cavas can be considered even more food friendly as well, because of this dryness and their personality. The grape, less perfect perhaps to have on their own, but arguably better with food, especially the small production, handcrafted ones, low sugar ones. I'll let you judge that once you've tasted a few, if you've tempted after watching this video. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are they more food friendly than Champagnes? What do you think of good, decent Reserva, Grand Reserva Cavas? Let me know in the comments. On this, I'll leave it here for today. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to the channel if you enjoy learning about wine. And I will see you indeed in the wonderful world of vino, linking to fantastic wine videos here if you want to learn more about some of the best wines in Spain and around the world. I'll see you soon in the wonderful world of wine. Cheers. Santé. Salud.